He stopped to feed a stray dog, then found a buried secret. Aaron pulled his truck to the side of the road that night, headlights carving through the emptiness like a knife through memory. You don't know him, but right now, it feels like you do. Because this isn't a story someone tells you. It's one you inherit, the moment you hear it, like a secret pressed into your hand, with the warning never to repeat it. He stepped out with a plastic bag half full of takeout scraps, the kind of food he never finished when eating alone, and that's when the dog appeared. Thin, shaking, its fur mangled with dirt, yet its eyes carried something human, like it had been waiting not for food but for him. He bent down, whispering comfort into the night air, but before the dog touched the food, it backed away. It kept staring at the same patch of ground, a mound of earth disturbed, just enough to suggest someone had been there recently, digging or burying. You're watching this unfold, and you already feel it, don't you? That sense? You've opened something not meant for you? A case file stamped with the wrong clearance level? Because as Aaron crouched closer, his hand brushed against the soil and came back black and not with dirt, but with something darker. Older, and the moment he touched it, the dog let out a sound that wasn't a bark or a whimper, but something closer to a warning, a low, trembling groan that made the hair on his neck stand like static. This is the part that unsettles everyone who hears it, the part that makes people swear they can't sleep afterward. When Aaron looked over his shoulder, just a reflex, as if expecting headlights, another passerby. A witness there was nothing. No cars, no sound of crickets. Not even the wind through the trees. Just silence, so absolute it pressed against his ears like pressure under deep water. Then, from that same silence, a voice bled through, not from the trees, not from the road, not even from the dog butt, from his own phone in his pocket. A voice belonging to someone who had been dead for years. It said one word, a name. And it wasn't his. Aaron froze, because he had only heard that voice once before, at a funeral where the casket was closed. His blood went cold, and yet, you know what chills him most? Not the name itself, but the fact the stray dog looked up at him then, as if it had been waiting for that exact moment, as if it already knew what was buried beneath. The ground shifted slightly, the soil breathing outward like lungs filling from beneath the earth. And Aaron realized he wasn't standing beside a grave. He was standing on something still alive. Would you like me to continue and carry this into a asterisk longer, dread-filled unfolding chapter, asterisk, where the buried truth reveals itself piece by piece? Or keep it strictly as a short cinematic opener for a video? Aaron didn't move at first. He couldn't. The earth at his feet felt alive, heaving in shallow breaths that might have been wind or something trying to claw upward. His mind screamed to run, but his body was caught in that sick paralysis you feel in the seconds before impact. Before the car spins. Before the stranger's hand reaches for you in the dark. And then his phone still in his pocket. Still warm against his leg let out a fractured buzz, not the clean vibration of a call or message, but something broken. He pulled it out, knuckles stiff, and the screen lit up with static like an old television. Lines racing. No signal, no time, no battery icon. Then, buried beneath the hiss, a voice. Faint, but deliberate. Not the same voice as before. This one sounded closer. Like it wasn't speaking to him, but through him. Using his own jawbone as an antenna. He staggered backward, blinking hard, but when he turned his head, the dog was gone. Just gone. No scurry of paws. No panting. No sound. The only thing that remained was the soil. Dark and damp, shaped. Now not like a mound, but like the impression of a body. And here's where you start to wonder, what if Aaron didn't see it right? What if trauma had already fractured his vision long before that night? Because later, when he told the story to the one person who would listen, even he admitted he wasn't sure if he'd imagined the shifting earth. Memory is slippery. That way it replaces what it can't hold with what it fears most. The second person enters here, though calling her reliable would be dishonest. Her name was Claire. She was the kind of woman people stop listening to halfway through her sentences. The kind who lives on the margins of every story, always circling. Never trusted. But Aaron trusted her, because she had once told him something no one else could have known, that she heard voices too. Not whispers. Not schizophrenia, the way doctors describe. But specific voices. the ones tied to faces she never should have remembered. Claire sat across from him in a diner off Route 6, her hair unkempt, eyes carrying that glassy glaze of someone who has gone too long without sleep. She listened as Aaron described the dog, the earth, the voice from his phone, and she didn't laugh. She didn't doubt! But she leaned closer, lowering her voice until it felt like the walls themselves might lean in too. They don't want you to remember what you saw, she said. They never do. That's why it comes back through the wrong channels, glitches, recordings, dead phones. Because your memory won't hold it. Aaron wanted to believe her, but paranoia doesn't sit neatly. It gnaws. That night, back at home, he scrolled through his call. Logged nothing unusual. Just spam numbers and missed calls, but one entry made his blood run dry. A voicemail saved from years ago. One he never remembered receiving. The date stamped on it was the night of his father's funeral. He pressed play, and through the crackling static came the same voice he'd heard in the soil. One word. The same name. But here's the fracture win. Aaron played it again. It wasn't a voice at all. Just dead air. The soft hum of silence. His mind screamed trick, but his chest felt otherwise. Something in him knew that silence wasn't empty. It was listening. And this is where doubt poisons everything. Because when Aaron went back to the diner the next day, Claire wasn't there. He asked the waitress, described her in detail. The hair, the tired eyes. The woman behind the counter gave him a look that cut through him. Sir, no one sat with you. You've been alone! Every time! It could have been misremembered. It could have been trauma, rewriting itself into a companion. But the napkin Claire had used, with her scrawl of a single phrase, dig where the dog stood, was still in his jacket pocket. You feel it now, don't you? That ache in your gut that tells you this isn't just Aaron's breakdown. It's a fracture in reality itself. A real, unsolved mystery, tied to those moments we're not meant to hold. Because when he went back to the patch of ground, shovel in hand, the soil gave way to Isley like it had been waiting. And what he uncovered wasn't a body. Wasn't bones, it was a tape recorder. Rusted, caked in mud. The kind sold in the 90s with cheap plastic buttons. It clicked on the moment he touched it, though no batteries could have lasted that long. And the voice that came through wasn't his father's. It wasn't Claire's. It was his own! It said, "You weren't supposed to feed the dog." And then it cut. Aaron dropped the recorder like it had burned him. His chest pounded, his mouth went dry, but the terror wasn't in what he heard, it was in the fact that he couldn't remember ever saying those words. He dug further, desperate now, like a man clawing at the last thread of sanity. Every layer of soil brought something new, a torn shirt, a cracked photograph, a phone battery corroded into dust. And each time, before he could breathe, the tape recorder clicked back on and played another fragment of his own voice. Each one more fractured than the last. You buried this for a reason. Stop remembering! They're watching you now. By the time he pulled the last object out a wallet with his own ID inside. But an expiration date years beyond the current year, Aaron. Wasn't sure if he was awake anymore. The trees bent wrong. The air stilled. And for one brief, horrifying second, he saw himself standing across the clearing, shovel in hand, staring back. When he blinked, the figure was gone. The soil lay untouched, smooth as if never disturbed. No recorder! No wallet! Nothing but his own hands, blistered and bleeding, and the dog watching from the tree line. Its eyes glowed faint, not with malice, but with recognition. And Aaron realized with a kind of bone-deep certainty that what he uncovered wasn't in the dirt at all. It had been buried inside him. But before that truth could form, before he could decide whether it meant madness or memory, his phone buzzed again. Only this time, it wasn't static. It was a video. One he didn't record. It showed him same clothes, same night standing over the soil, whispering something to the dog. And the final frame froze on his mouth, forming the words he swore he never spoke. Don't tell him what you saw. The video ended. The dog vanished, and Aaron's phone went black. Would you like me to carry this into the spiral and collapse phase? Where the story dives deeper into paranoia, unreliable timeline. and a breaking point between madness and supernatural lore. Keep this chapter contained here and let the cliffhanger stand. Aaron woke the next morning with the kind of clarity people describe after near-death experiences. The dread from the night before clung to him like a second skin, but for the first time since the dog, he believed he had an answer. He convinced himself it was a puzzle, a cruel one. Maybe, but a puzzle nonetheless. The tape recorder, the shifting earth, the strange video on his phone, it all had to connect back to someone manipulating him. Maybe Claire? If she existed? Or maybe someone else who had been watching since his father's funeral? He told himself what any rational man would. Asterisk, you're not crazy, they lied to you. He repeated it like a prayer, over and over, as if repetition could seal the cracks forming in his mind. And for a while, the lie worked. For a while, he felt steady. That steadiness broke the moment he found the photo. It wasn't lying in the dirt this time. It was pinned to his refrigerator with a magnet. He knew the picture well. It was him, younger, standing beside his father in their backyard in Illinois. The one place that had always felt untouchable, like the roots of his identity were planted there. Except in this photo, his father's eyes were shut, and Aaron swore he remembered them open. The detail was small, insignificant, but once he noticed it, the whole memory collapsed. If the eyes were closed, then who had been watching him all those years ago when the picture was taken? And worse, who had taken the picture at all? That was the false resolution. 4 days, Aaron built a case against his own past. He called cousins, old neighbors, people who might confirm or deny the smallest details. He even drove 8 hours back to the house he grew up in, staring at the backyard fence, certain that if he stood in the same spot, if he recreated the photo, the truth would reveal itself. And in a way, it did. A neighbor, an older man with a limp and tired eyes, swore he remembered seeing Aaron as a boy out back with his father. But then the neighbor added something that turned Aaron's blood cold. Strangest thing, though. Thought I saw you there again last summer. Same clothes, same stance. Only your father wasn't with you. Just you staring at the fence, like you were waiting for someone. 4 hours Aaron sat in his truck, gripping the steering wheel, replaying the words until they carved into him. A memory glitch. That's what it felt like someone had lifted one of his memories and pressed it back into place with the wrong edges. And that's when the deeper fear crept in. What if the false resolution wasn't a resolution at all? What if it was just another layer in the cover? Another lie designed to pacify him long enough to forget again. He remembered something then. Not fully, but in fragments. A childhood night. Heavy rain. His father's voice calling from inside the house while he stood barefoot in the mud, staring at the fence line. He remembered the sound of someone whispering his name, not his father, not anyone he knew. And he remembered the dog. Younger, smaller, the same eyes, sitting by the fence, as if it had been waiting for him even then. The memory should have comforted him, should have grounded him, but instead it unspooled everything. Because when he got back into the house that night and checked his phone, there was a new video waiting for him. This one was darker, the frame blurred by water spots, like rain had soaked the lens. It showed the backyard fence, same angle, same spot. But the figure in the video wasn't him. It was a child, barefoot, staring into the night as if listening to something just beyond the trees. And the audio, faint beneath the static, carried a whisper, not meant for a child's ears. Asterisk, stop remembering. That was the moment the false resolution collapsed. The photo, the neighbor, the tripod hadn't uncovered the truth. It had been bait, pulling him closer to the thing that had been there all along. Something that mirrored his every move, something that blurred itself into his history until he couldn't tell if he'd lived it or been shown it later. A hidden truth disguised as memory, a shadow learning him better than he learned himself. Aaron sat in the silence of his father's old house and felt it. Not a presence in the corner, not footsteps in the hall, but something heavier. The sense of being studied, dissected, as if his entire life had been a series of experiments to see how much he would notice. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. And in that suffocating quiet, the walls of the house seemed to breathe not with air, but with memory, replaying things he couldn't escape. And then the event from the past surfaced in its entirety. He was 12. His cousin had vanished one summer night while the family gathered for a barbecue. Everyone assumed she'd wandered too far, maybe down to the creek, maybe into the woods. The police searched, the family wept, but she was never found. Aaron hadn't thought of it in years, maybe decades, but now he remembered with cruel precision. He was the last one to see her. She had been at the fence, barefoot, staring at the dog. And just before she disappeared, she whispered to him, her voice too steady for a child, "They're watching you." It struck him like lightning. The cycle wasn't beginning, it had never stopped. His cousin's disappearance was the same pattern repeating, memory looping. Details erased and replaced, until the line between past and present blurred into the same wound. But here's the part that gnaws at you long after you stop listening. When Aaron tried to call his mother to confirm the story, she didn't recognize him. She said she never had a son. She said she never had a daughter either. Never any children at all. Her voice was steady, calm, too calm, like she'd rehearsed the line. And then the line went dead. He looked down at his phone and saw the same video again, the child at the fence butt this time. When the frame froze at the end, the child turned its head. Not toward the trees. Not toward the dog. Toward him. Toward the camera! And its face was his. Aaron dropped the phone. His breath came ragged, his skin cold with sweat. He wanted to scream, to claw his way out of whatever trap he'd fallen into. But the truth was clear now. The false resolution hadn't been a mistake, it had been a lure. Every step toward the answer was another layer, pulling him deeper into the thing that had been watching since the beginning. The thing that erased memories and replaced them with itself. And here, as the twist, you can unsee once you know it. When Aaron looked in the mirror that night, expecting his own reflection, he saw the child. Barefoot, muddy, standing by the fence. And the reflection moved its mouth before he did. It whispered, "You've been telling their story." And the glass went black. Do you want me to carry the fourth chapter into the breaking point phase? Where paranoia and supernatural collapse fully overlap, and nothing can be trusted anymore, not even the audience's memory of earlier chapters. Aaron thought the mirror was the breaking point, that the image of the barefoot child staring back at him would be the worst of it. But that was before he realized he wasn't alone. Not in the house, not in the story, not in the way he once believed he owned his memories. He woke in the night to the vibration of his phone on the floor. A faint buzzing, like a trapped insect. When he picked it up, the screen didn't light. It pulsed faint waves of dim gray, and then letters began to scrawl themselves, not typed, but etched across the glass like scratches in bone. Asterisk, you were right all along. His throat tightened. Because it wasn't a message meant to comfort, it was an admission that someone else had been watching. The phone didn't stop there. Images began to cycle through. Quick flashes, too fast to register, but heavy enough to leave after images burned into his vision. A creek at night. A line of children barefoot on the fence. A recording dated August 1998 labeled found footage from 20 years ago. He tried to close his eyes, but the flashes burned behind them still, and in one frame he swore he saw Claire. She wasn't older, wasn't different from the night at the diner. She was just standing there, watching, as if she had been present all along. And then another frame, a circle carved into the dirt, an endless spiral of dogs surrounding it, their eyes glowing like embers. Aaron realized then that the deeper force wasn't hiding anymore. It didn't need to. It had already taken root in others, people who had lived parallel lives, carrying the same glitches, the same fractures. He started receiving texts from numbers he didn't recognize. Long strings of coordinates, half sentences, unfinished thoughts. Dig where the creek bends south. Stop the tape before it rewinds. Do not trust your reflection. These weren't spam. They weren't accidents. They were secret communications from others who had seen what he saw and survived long enough to send warnings. And here's where the conspiracy becomes unbearable. Because the symbols began to appear outside his phone. Carved into the condensation on his bathroom mirror, scratched into the wood of his father's old table, chalked in white on the sidewalk in front of his motel room. Spirals, lines, a series of 3 dots followed by a cross. At first, he thought they were hallucinations, trauma imprinted onto objects. But one morning, When he opened the curtain, he saw a woman across the street tracing the same symbol on her window with her fingertip. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. The recognition was enough. Aaron began dreaming in sync with strangers. He'd close his eyes and see faces he'd never met, men and women. Old and young standing in the same circle of dirt, holding shovels, staring at him with the same silent accusation. They knew what he'd uncovered, knew he was pulling at threads he had no right to touch. Some nights, he dreamt of his cousin, the one who vanished, except she wasn't a child anymore. She looked exactly as she would have at 30. Her hair wet, as though she had just crawled out of the creek, whispering, what the government never released was the real footage, the one that shows you. The dread became communal. Aaron wasn't trapped in his own mind anymore. He was part of something wider, a web of fractured identities and corrupted histories that stretched back decades. It made him question if any of them had ever been whole. How many others had been fed stray dogs and found buried secrets? How many had lived lives that were just staged rehearsals of the same story? The worst part wasn't the paranoia itself, it was the intimacy of it. Whoever they were, whatever force circled around this memory, they didn't just know him, they were him, spliced into other lives, refracted through other eyes, making identity itself a lie. And then came the observer. At first it was just a voice, not like the distorted whispers or the recordings, but raw, human, unpolished. It came through an old cassette tape Aaron found in his father's desk, unmarked, coated with dust. He played it, expecting silence, but instead, a woman's voice filled the room, steady but cracking under the weight of fatigue. If you're hearing this, it means they let you remember again. I don't know how long you've had, but listen carefully. You are not the only one. We've all seen it. We've all lived it. And every time we get close, they erase it. The footage from 20 years ago. It's real. It's buried in us. And the reason you can't tell who you are anymore is because you were never allowed to be just one person. Aaron froze, because the voice was familiar in a way that made his stomach turn. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't his mother. It was him. Older, weaker, like a recording of a life he hadn't lived yet. He replayed it, desperate to hear the cracks, the slips, something that would betray it as fabrication, but each replay sounded more certain. This wasn't an observer from outside. This was an observer from after. The cassette ended abruptly, but before the click, the voice added one final line. The kind of line that splits a person in two. You've been watching the story, but you've also been the story. And the ones sending you messages, they're watching through you. Aaron wanted to throw the tape across the room, to deny it, to scream it into nothing. But outside his window, he saw them. Dozens of figures standing in the dark, silent, each one holding a phone raised toward him, screens glowing. No faces visible, just a collective hum of watchers recording the moment. And as his chest heaved, his phone lit up again with a single new message. Asterisky, not crazy, they lied to you. Now it's your turn to lie for them. Asterisk. The message ended there, but the energy of it didn't. The house vibrated faintly, as if memory itself was shaking, ready to collapse. Aaron closed his eyes and knew with a certainty that left him sick. This was never about uncovering the truth. It was about becoming part of the machinery that hides it. And as the screen flickered and the watchers outside began to move closer, their phones capturing every second, the ending didn't come. It pulsed, open, unfinished, forcing a single question into the hollow of your chest. Whose story have you been living? Do you want me to take the next chapter into audience entanglement, where viewers are not just witnesses, but implicated as participants in the conspiracy with symbols, names, and references that feel like they bleed into their own lives? Aaron had reached the point where answers no longer mattered. The evidence, the recordings, the dreams, the watches, all of it formed a circle that only pulled him back to where he started. Standing over disturbed earth with a stray dog as his silent witness. He thought he wanted the what? The specifics of who was responsible. What force was pulling the strings? What had carved symbols into his life like a scar he never asked for? But what gnawed at him wasn't the mechanics of the mystery. It was the why. Why him? Why the others? Why any of it needed to repeat through generations like a wound that refuses to close? He stared at himself in the mirror again. Not the child this time, but his own hollow face under the dim bathroom light. He whispered words he never thought he'd say out loud, because sometimes confession is the only thing left to keep a person tethered. I buried it. His chest tightened, his mouth dry. It wasn't the ground. It wasn't the dog. It was me! I buried it because I couldn't stand to remember. The air in the room grew heavier, pressing into him, but he didn't look away. He let the admission crack him open. And in that unbearable moment, it felt like he wasn't confessing to himself, but to whoever had been watching all along. The phone lit again, only this time without distortion. Just a text. Asterisk we know. Aaron sank to the floor. It was too much. He wanted to fight, to scream, to demand that anyone explain what he'd been dragged into, but all that came was silence, and in that silence, he realized the deeper truth. This wasn't about surveillance, or control, or even memory manipulation. It was about grief. Every erased face, every warped tape, every missing voice, it was all built on the same foundation. The human need to protect ourselves from what we can endure. We bury the things we can't hold, and when they claw back through, we call it haunting, conspiracy, supernatural. But maybe the force watching wasn't foreign at all. Maybe it was human sorrow, multiplied, sharpened, and passed like a contagion through anyone who ever tried to forget. He saw it clearly then, the thread tying it all together. His father's closed eyes in the photo, his cousin at the fence, Claire's scribbled message. None of them were about hiding the truth. They were about sparing him from it. Because the truth wasn't a revelation waiting to save him. The truth was a blade. And to hold it fully would mean cutting everything else away: his name, his family, his sanity. The watchers outside grew closer, their phones trembling faintly as if they were waiting for him to make the choice. And maybe that's what it was all along. Not a conspiracy to erase him, but a test. Asterisk, what will you allow yourself to believe? If he chose the memories, he'd never come back. If he chose the silence, he'd never be free. His phone buzzed one last time. Another video. He pressed play with shaking hands, and what he saw wasn't a recording, it was live. Himself, from above, staring at the phone, staring into the camera, trapped in the loop of his own unraveling. And then the screen fractured, showing 1,000 versions of him, each caught in different stages of denial, fear, acceptance. He realized then that identity was never solid. It was memory layered on memory, and the thing watching wasn't outside of him. It was inside. The part that kept asking the questions he was too afraid to face. Aaron whispered through tears, "I don't want to know anymore. I just want to be real again." For a moment, the silence lifted. He felt the air shift, felt the watcher's pause, felt the dog's eyes always, the dog fixed on him from the shadows. And for a heartbeat, he believed he was free. But freedom is its own trick. Because when he blinked, the house was gone. The watchers were gone. The dog was gone. He was standing at the fence in Illinois again, barefoot, 12 years old, staring into the night as if no time had passed. And this is the part that tears at you, the part that feels like waking from a dream you didn't know you were in. He wasn't reliving it. He wasn't imagining it. He was still there, always there, repeating the same loop, the same silence, the same choice that never resolves. The truth wasn't about what happened to him. The truth was that it never stopped happening. Aaron looked down at his hands small, childlike again. Trembling with Madand understood that the mystery wasn't meant to be solved. It was meant to be endured. And the reason it chose him was the same reason it chooses all of us. Because forgetting is impossible and remembering is unbearable. The last sound was his own voice, layered over itself, older and younger at once, whispering into the mirror of whoever was listening. Asterisk, you are not alone in this. But that doesn't mean you'll survive it. Asterisk. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, And subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.